Do you know that you live in paradise? I came from Tennessee, Collegedale actually, where it was 92 degrees and humid, and this feels like paradise to me. So Nova Scotia is definitely on my retirement options list. It's beautiful. I've never been to Canada before.
Oh, really?
Can you hear me? Good, now you can. I don't need to repeat what I said before, right?
No.
But I'm saying that I traveled a lot, visited many countries of the world, but I've never been to Canada. This is my first time, and it is beautiful. The Lord truly blessed everyone living in this gorgeous part of the world. All those shores and nature, just beautiful. And the sunset. Any of you seen the sunset last night? I've taken 300 pictures of that sunset. It's on my Facebook, my Instagram, everywhere. It's just beautiful. This was the official end of the Sabbath day. We had a good Sabbath day. It was a wonderful day. But yeah, being here is my privilege, and I'm grateful for the invitation. And I arrived late Friday night, and my flight was delayed, and I was tired. I had to take several flights and to do some driving, and I was very thankful to Pastor Sharp for helping me find the location. So as I was lost a little bit in Pugwash, just a few, should I say kilometers, not miles, right, away from here. So I was asking for some landmarks so I would recognize, because it was already dark. And so Ed gave me a few markers. He said there would be a golf club. And I didn't see a golf club because it was dark and late. But as I was driving closer, I noticed there were 3 or 4 or maybe more raccoons right sitting on the road, right on the road, in the middle of the road. And as I was coming closer, I noticed they were sort of like having a board meeting. And they were so upset that I had to dismiss their meeting, like driving on that road. So I thought, that looks like a Seventh-day Adventist church, so it should be somewhere close by. And I was right, so I was just a few yards, a few meters away from this camp. And I've been enjoying every moment of it since Friday night, including that storm that we had here. It was a strong storm. But what I enjoy the most is walking. I love walking. I'm a person who walks whenever I have a few free minutes. And that's why I carry this Fitbit. Some of you may have it, and some of you may know what it is. But I do a lot of walking, and I register every step that I'm making, because I believe in walking. I believe in walking. We need to walk at least 10,000 steps every day. Any of you walking 10,000 steps every day? Good. Good for you. But I love walking not on my own. I love walking with my wife. Walking with my wife makes all the difference. But as I looked at your brochure for the meeting, it says a walk of faith. So that's a different kind of a walk. That's not just a walk to strengthen your muscle and to increase your metabolism. That's a different kind of a walk. So what is that walk all about? Because there are different paths and there are different walks. There is that earthly path and earthly direction that we are taking, or material path. And there is that spiritual path that Paul is talking about in Ephesians, especially chapter 5. We'll not read from Ephesians this morning, but I'll just draw your attention that again and again, especially in chapter 5, he's using that concept of walking. He's saying you need to walk in wisdom. You need to walk in faith. You need to walk in love. You need to walk in the light, right? So there is some walking involved. As Christians, we should not be lazy. I know it's a great camp meeting, and lots of good presentations are here, and then we have great churches, and we come to our churches, we sit there on a Sabbath morning, we enjoy the message, and then we go home, find our spiritual couch, and wait for the next Sabbath, right? No, there is more that is needed. There is that walking that is expected of us. We need to be walking all the time. We need to be walking spiritually by faith in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. Walking is needed. Otherwise, we become spiritually obese. You know what I'm talking about? When we know so much, when we have so much, we know all the prophecies, we can study our Sabbath school lesson, we have great messages, we have tons of spiritual books on our shelves. We love literature, right? Spiritual books. We love our magazines. We have all kinds of spiritual treasure around us. I see that spiritual treasure as calories. So we have all those spiritual calories around us. So what are we doing with those spiritual calories? That's where that walk of faith comes into place. When we need to exercise spiritually. And we need to be spiritually fit. And when we walk that walk of faith, everything starts to change. And it changes, of course, only if we walk with Jesus. Amen. Or if we walk towards Jesus, because Jesus is always walking towards us. He's actually running like the father of the prodigal son was running towards his son. That same way Jesus is always running towards us. And then he's saying, let's walk together. Let's walk together. That makes all the difference. Then we start realizing that Jesus has his own pace. We have our pace. We all walk differently, right? Some of us walk fast. Some of us walk slow. Some of us like our own trails and paths. But it is when we walk with Jesus, we need to adapt our walking to the walk of Jesus. Because then we know we'll be fine by the end of that walk. You know, when I walk with my wife, she is usually not pacing her walk. She starts fast. And then she's walking so fast in the beginning that I'm always trying to slow her down. I'm saying, slow down, because we have a long walk. We still have 6 miles ahead of us, so we need to have enough energy to get back. So slow down now and just plan it right. And she does not always like it. You know, ladies usually don't like when they're being told what to do. But still, and we are trying to walk together so that we have the same pace, the same speed of our walk. And then we meet Jesus. Whenever we meet Jesus in our spiritual walk, we realize Jesus walks not like everyone else. His walk is different. And that's why when Jesus was here on this earth and when he was doing his ministry, preaching and healing and helping, everyone was looking at Jesus and asking, who is that man? Remember Matthew chapter 8, verse 27. That question is right there. It says that people were looking at Jesus, watching him walk and talk, and they were all amazed. And they were all asking that question. Who is he? Who is that man? What is different about that man? And he was different. And his walk was different. And his talk was different. So when we start walking that walk of faith with Jesus Christ, everything changes in us. Amen. We become different. And we don't like to be different. We want just to get lost in the crowd. Isn't that how we feel? We don't like to be up front here. Most of us don't like to be up front. Most of us don't like to be in front of the crowd. We feel nervous. we feel like we can faint. I actually have seen a great deacon in our church who was asked to come up front and read the scripture, and he was saying, please don't make me do that because I don't like being up front. And I said, no, that's fine, let's try it, and you will like it. And he went up and he passed. I mean, he fainted. And didn't pass away, of course, but I'm saying he fainted. Then I felt awful because of that. So I remember one of my daughters came home from her class, and that was a public speaking class. And she said one of their students, a young man who was tough and handsome, and everyone believed he was the most awesome one, had to speak in front of his class, and he fainted while he was speaking. So you know what I'm talking about, right? We don't like to stand out. We want just to be in the crowd. We want to be like everyone else. We want not to be paid attention. We just want to be like everyone else. And that's exactly what Satan is trying to achieve. He's saying, why should you be different? Look at this whole world around you. Look at your community. Look at your society. Look at where you live. Everyone lives this way. Everyone lives that lifestyle. Everyone believes that way. All of us have that culture and that philosophy. So why should you be different? Have you heard him say that to you? Why should you stand out? You probably noticed right away when I opened my mouth that I have a strong accent because I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union, the country that does not exist anymore. But that's where I was born, that's where I grew up, in the communist, atheistic society, even though I came from Tennessee, but that's not where I lived most of my life. So, growing up in the communist environment, I was pressured by the society, by the government, by my school to be like everyone else. That was the whole concept there. You have to be like everyone else. And if everyone else believes that there is no God and that evolution is the only answer to this universe, that's the way you need to believe. And so the media was controlled by the government, and all the newspapers were controlled by the government, and there were not many radio stations. Actually, there were only 2 radio stations that you could listen to. They were all government radio stations, and you didn't even have to tune to those stations. You just pushed the button, and there you listened to the government propaganda. So it was from early morning till late evening, all that propaganda by the government that there's no God, that evolution is the only answer, the Bible is just the book of imagined fables, and so that's how everyone believed. That's how everyone thought it should be, but God blessed me that I was born in the family of Seventh-day Adventist parents. Amen. Those parents that believe that there is God, the creator of the universe, that there is Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior, and they believe that they need to preach this message, and it was hard. Through the course of this week, I'll share some of the stories of my parents also, how they had to go through the persecution and the hard time during communism and atheism. But I remember as every morning, as we were preparing to go to school, and there were 6 of us, 6 children. So our parents would, especially our mom, because my dad was a pastor, and he would travel, even though he was not officially allowed to be a pastor, but he was doing it still. Illegally, he was still working as a pastor, not just a pastor of one church, but for the whole area. When I was a kid, he was overseeing the work of our church in Central Asia. That included countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. You heard of those countries, right? So my mom would gather all of us, 6 of us, And he would be saying, you go to a school now. And that was not a church school, because there were no church schools there at that time. So you are going to a church school, to the communist government school, and they'll be teaching you atheism. But I want you to remember that Jesus Christ is your Lord and your Savior. And the Bible is the only answer to all those questions. So she would bring us together, and she would embrace us all. And we were of different ages, but we were still in the same school. When I started the first grade, my sister was in the 10th grade, so we were 10 years apart. There later on came another sister. She's 6 years younger than me, but at that time there were 5 of us, and she would pray with us. And that prayer would carry me through the day. I would just remember that prayer of my mother, praying that the Lord would give us strength and energy and courage to be different, to stand out in our school. Isn't that what Paul talking about in Peter? He is saying that to us. He said, you need to be different. You need to be different because you are special. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, he says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And then, I like how he says, his own special people. Just think about it for a moment. His own special people. Couldn't he just say special people? No, but he's saying his. That is, you belong to Jesus Christ. You belong to God. You are his. But then he's emphasizing that in that translation. He's saying you are his own. You belong to him. You are his. And then he says you are special people. You are not like everyone else. You need to remember that. He said you need to stand out. You need to be different. Don't be afraid. Peter says, don't be afraid to be different. It's okay to be different. I should say, you need to be afraid, and I need to be afraid of being like everyone else. But being different, growing up in that culture where everyone else had a different opinion or a lifestyle than you, was helping me to develop my own position. I'm all for Seventh-day Adventist schools and Christian education. And in my church in Collegedale area, we have one of the most prosperous schools there. And I love that school very much. But growing up, where I did not have a chance to be in a Seventh-day Christian school, going to the communist school every day, I was learning how to stand out. I was learning how to be different. So I remember one of the first days in that school came, and I was just 7 years old at that time. And everyone in that school had to be a part of a kids' communist organization that was called Oktyabrята. So that's a Russian word. So it means you were a kid, like a child following Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union state. And there was a special ceremony for that, like an induction ceremony. And I remember that day was announced, and I came home and I talked to my mom, and I'm saying, I'm not going to school that day. And she asked me, why? Why wouldn't you go to school? Because I said, that's the day when everyone would be given a badge showing that they joined that organization. Everyone had to be a part of it. So that was sort of to compare it with the adventurers, like in our Seventh-day Adventist church. And there would be a badge, and I knew I didn't want to be a part of that organization, because they all believed that there was no God. They did not believe in the Bible as the book that was inspired by God. And so my mom said, that's fine, that's okay. You don't have to go to school if you don't want to be there on that day. And so I didn't go to school that day, and I come the next day. And as I come, I see everyone has a badge, a shining badge made of metal. And there's a face of Lenin. And that face was of Lenin when he was still a little kid. So there's that kid's face there. And the shiny badge, and it looks great on everyone, and I do not have one. So naturally, everyone looking at me started asking me, Peter, where is your badge? And that was the morning when, for the first time in my life, I had to stand for my faith. Being 7 years old, I realized I am different. I am different. I'm not like everyone else. And that's not something that I can change, because as a child of God, I am different. And I remember my teacher. We had a teacher for that class especially. She knew everything about me. She knew that I was a Christian, that I was a Seventh-day Adventist, but she wanted to make a big deal out of that. So she calls the school principal, and they lined up the whole first grade, and there were lots of kids, and not just in my class, but in all the other grades, the first graders. They brought all of them together, they lined them up in a big auditorium, they brought me in front of everyone else, and the school principal walks towards me with that badge. And she's saying, Peter, you missed the ceremony and you didn't get your badge, but here you are and here we are. So this morning we are officially, we're pinning this badge to your shirt. And she comes towards me, and I will never forget that moment as I close that area with both hands. And I said, I am not putting on that badge because I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And there was a gasp in that auditorium. All those kids. And there were several hundred of them. They were just shocked. You should have seen their kids' eyes open wide. They were all looking at me, and the school principal looked frustrated, and then the class teacher looked very disappointed, and the school principal turned to the whole auditorium filled with children, and she started putting a shame on me, saying, look at that young man, he's brainwashed by his parents, he believes that there is God, but you know that he is wrong. And she just walked away. So all the kids were taken back to their classes, and at the end of that school day, I remember as all those kids were looking at me like I was weird. They were looking at me like what's wrong with you? But I felt special that day. I felt so special that day. I knew my mom prayed for me. And that prayer carried me through the day. And that day especially, just even as a kid, I realized what standing out is all about. What walking with Jesus is all about. That's when you understand that your thoughts should be different. Your life and your actions should be different. Your priorities should be different. And that's why, again, Peter is helping us understand in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. He says, therefore, gird up the loins of your mind. Be sober and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then he confirms it again in verse 15. He said, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And we know what holy is all about, right? It is about being different. He says, gird up the loins of your mind. He is referring to the culture of the time when Even men would have sort of like a robe, and when they needed to run, what would they do? They would pick up the robe and start running. So he's saying, get ready. When you walk with Jesus Christ, everything will change. And your outlook will change, and your thoughts will change, and your lifestyle will change, and you need to see things differently as the child of God. We live in that culture now. When we, again, not even in the communist environment, we don't live in communism in the United States or in Canada, but we're still being brainwashed, right? Continuously. And the media is trying to control our minds. And unfortunately, we see like just very few media outlets are trying to form our mindset. They're trying to make us think all the same way. And we see like Hollywood culture, especially in the United States, is just spreading its influence all around the world. And forming our mentality and making us think about ourselves the way they want us to think about it. And it is so unfortunate that you feel that presence of the media from the Hollywood, even if you travel far away. I remember in 2009, I was in Kazakhstan to preach a Bible seminar there. I traveled back to the Soviet Union territory at least twice a year, and I present Bible seminars in different places over there. But I wanted to go back to Kazakhstan so much because that's where I grew up, that's where I lived as a kid, and that's a Muslim area, so it wasn't easy to get there and to preach there. But still, the Lord opened the doors and the opportunity to come there, and I'm there in Kazakhstan, and I'm preaching, but there was no internet connection in the hotel. So, and I need to write a few emails, and I found a bakery shop, like a coffee shop nearby. I go there, I'm using the internet, their Wi-Fi connection, writing my emails, and I hear the music. And I started listening, and the music is not in their own language. They use Kazakh language, but the music is in English. And I started listening again and again, and I hear it's Britney Spears. So, and I'm thinking, wait, I'm in Kazakhstan. Why would she be singing there in Kazakhstan? Don't they have their own local music there? Don't they have their own singers there? It is disappointing. It is disappointing. I go often to Ukraine. And as I'm preaching in Ukraine, I was there many times, but I remember once especially walking through the streets of the capital city. And the capital city is Kyiv. And as I walk through that city, I see big billboards, and I look and I see a face. And I thought, wait, I think I know that face. I've seen it somewhere else. And I looked closer. Of course, Brad Pitt there in Ukraine on those billboards. And I'm saying, don't they have their own actors? Don't they have their own culture there? Why is that one culture penetrating everywhere? Why is that culture influencing our minds? Doesn't matter where we live, in Kazakhstan or Ukraine or in Canada or the United States of America. Why are we being so brainwashed? That's why Peter says, you need to be watching. You need to be watching. You need to gird up your mind, the loins of your mind. In other words, watch what you're reading. Watch and be careful of what you're watching. And don't allow it to be influenced by the culture of your time. He's not saying that you need to run away. He's not saying that you need to hide. But he's saying you need to be on the alert. You are God's special people. And as God's special people, you need to know where your source of nourishment is coming. Nourishment for your mind. And that's why he's saying treasure God's word. And remember, you are God's holy people. Live like God's holy people. Amen. But not just our mind. He's saying, our life should be different. Because that's how he's emphasizing. He says you need to be holy in your conduct. In everything that you do, it should be showing that you are different. I was already a teenager when I was drafted to serve in the Soviet Union military. There was no option for me. I mean, every young man had to go and to serve in the military. So I was barely 18 at that time, and so I had to go through the medical examination. And all the other boys and the guys from my school had to be there for that medical examination. And as we were going from inside of that medical building, from one office to another office, we all knew that at the very end there would be a big auditorium. And in that auditorium, there would be a city commission of the city officials and the military officials. And they would interview you, and they are making a decision for you where to serve in the military. And I didn't want to serve in the regular troops because I didn't want to bear arms. So I knew there is a way to serve in the construction division. Sort of like you in the military, but you do more or less like, almost like civil work. You know, you're just building some government buildings. So I was praying to God, saying, God, I need to convince those officials that I would be just serving as a civil person in that division, just doing the construction. But God, give me the right words and help me to have the courage to talk to them. So to go through that commission, through the medical examination, we all had to be basically like fully undressed except for our underwear. And so we go from one office to another office, and it takes a long time, a long line of guys there. And we go from one doctor to another doctor, and I feel a little nervous. I know just in a few moments I will be there, and I need to talk to them. So I'm praying as I go through those offices. I'm praying, God, give me the right words. God, help them see that I'm not like everyone else, that I'm different because I'm a Christian. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And so finally, I'm standing in front of those big doors. And I feel my heart is pounding inside of me, and I'm all sweaty, and I'm just praying, Lord, I don't want to faint. Give me the energy. Give me the strength. And doors open, and I walk into that huge auditorium, but there are very few people. There is a big table covered with a red cloth, and I see the city officials sitting there and all those military guys, and I'm standing in front of them. They're opening my folder, and they're asking me my name and my age, and so finally I hear they're saying, now we need to decide, Comrade Kulakov, where you would be serving for the next 2 years. And right there, as I was praying, I'm saying to myself, so this is the time. So now you need to speak. So I'm looking at all of them, and I'm saying, wait, before you make that decision, I want you to know that I'm a Christian, and I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I do not work on the Sabbath day. And they all looking at me, and there's that long pause, like they were so startled by that statement that was made by the naked guy standing right in front of all those city officials. And they started looking at one another, and they are confused. And I see as the main military guy, I don't remember what rank he was, but he looked at me, he took my folder again into his hands, and he's asking me, so, and why is that you don't work on the Sabbath day? And I said to myself, okay, that's the time to preach my first sermon. And I'm saying, God, I was not prepared. I did not bring my notes. I do not have my Bible with me. But I need to say the right words. So I said that short prayer right there in my heart and in my mind. And I started all the way from the creation and how God created this world and God rested on the Sabbath day and how God gave His 10 commandments on the Mount Sinai, and I keep going on and they are not stopping me. And they are all listening. And they are all listening, and I see they are very interested. Because that was probably the first time ever in that former Soviet Union, in that communist country, they learned something that they've never heard before. And they were listening, and only God knows what happened to all of them after that. Maybe some of them, or maybe one of them became a Christian. That I don't know. And I will know only in heaven, but one thing I know. That was my first sermon ever preached in my life. Preached without a suit, preached without a tie, preached in my underwear, and as I was preaching, I knew God was giving me the right words. And I was preaching and just praying, saying, God, I need to make them accept my request. God, they need to understand that's where I need to be. So when I finished the sermon, I noticed the Spirit changed. And they felt differently. And again, they talked among themselves. And they said, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. You convinced us, they said. You can serve in that military construction. So your request is granted. And I left that auditorium. I left that city official's place. And I went home celebrating. I came home and I talked to my dad, who was a pastor. And I said, Dad, I finally preached my first sermon. Dad, and my dad was happy, of course. And I said, they granted the request, and now I can serve. I knew it would not be still easy. I'll be sharing more with you during the week on that. But I said, God does answer our prayers. Whenever we are ready to stand out, not running away. I don't want anyone to get confused. This world is different from us. This world has a different mentality, different mindset. This world has a different lifestyle. And Jesus Christ is not calling us to run away. He is sending us into this world. He's sending us there to shine, to walk in the light. He said, you need to be that light. And so when people see you, they know that you are different. And when they know that you are different, they will start asking questions. They would want to know more about you. They would want to know why. Tell us why. Why is it that you're worshiping on the Sabbath day? Why Sabbath? Why not Sunday? Tell us more about your lifestyle. Tell us more about your marriage. Tell us more about your family. That's where we start making friends. And there were a number of situations during my school years when I had to be in a work bee, and those work bees they used to have only on Saturdays, no other day, and that was a big deal because especially a couple of times a year, those work bees would be like for the whole nation. Everyone had to work on that day, not just cleaning, but workers, the plants and factories had to go and work for free on that Sabbath day, on Saturday. I mean. So when that day would be coming, I always knew that that would be another challenge because that was considered like a political betrayal. If you're not showing up for the government-assigned work bee, then you are a traitor. Then you are not a patriot of your nation. So, coming back to school one of those times on Monday morning, I remember the school principal gathered the whole school together again. And then she brought me up front, put me in front of the microphone. And she was saying, now explain to all your classmates and to this whole school and all the students. I'm looking, there's probably 1,500 students standing. different ages, boys and girls. Explain to them why you did not show up on the Sabbath day. And I would turn to her and I would say, but they know and you know that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And she would be saying all the time, she would be trying to bring the shame on. And she would be trying to humiliate me. And I remember the first time when I had to speak there about the word be and being a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm not doing regular work on the Sabbath day. She turned to me and she said, no one would want to be friends with you, Peter. And I remember that same afternoon, like there was a break between classes, and I noticed there were more of those students that wanted to talk to me. They were coming to me left and right, asking me, tell us, what is that about your church? Why are you not working on the Sabbath day, on Saturdays? Tell us more, and not just the guys, but I noticed the girls were even more interested. and that's why in 1 Peter chapter 2, in verse 6, Peter is saying, quoting actually Isaiah 28:16, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he who believes on him will by no means be put to shame. Amen. And that's the verse that was coming to my mind again and again, that when we are walking a walk of faith, we'll never be put to shame. Amen. Whenever we are walking with Jesus Christ, we become popular because everyone want to know more about us. They would be looking at us as they were looking at Jesus and asking that question, who is he? What is that man? Who is that man? How can he speak with that authority? And how he can make all those miracles? What is about that man? And that same way, when we are walking a walk of faith with Jesus Christ, I promise you, this whole world will be looking at you and saying, what are those people? What makes them different? Why are they standing out? And will never be put to shame. Because as the children of God will realize, there is the dignity. Satan is trying to put us down. Satan is trying just to bring us into the big crowd of his followers. And when we are in that big crowd, in the army of Satan, then we are lost there. Then we are like everyone else. We live like everyone else, we walk like everyone else, and there's no dignity in us. And that's where he's trying to keep us like his hostages. But it is when we allow Jesus Christ to take our hand and to say, come walk with me. Walk with me. And then he's pulling us out of the crowd and he's saying, you are different. You are my child. I created you. I gave you life. I died for you on the cross. Come walk with me. And as he's pulling us out of the crowd, everyone is looking at us. That's a trying moment, right? Amen. That's a trying moment. That's when we feel confused. I very often preach in Eastern Europe. And I noticed that most of the time when I preach about the Sabbath day, people have no problem with that, which is strange. It seems strange for those living in the western part of the world, here in the United States or Canada. Like the Sabbath subject, the topic is so hard for people to accept. Over there, they're fine with that, most of the time. But then, after I finish the sermon on the Sabbath, and they all agree that yes, that's in the commandments, and yes, we need to worship on the Sabbath day, most of them come to me with a different question. They say, yes, that's true, that's what the Bible says, and I like it. That's what I want to do, but Peter, what about my family? They worship on a different day. And what about my mom? Because she'll be disappointed. And what about my grandmother? She died worshiping on Sunday, and I know that for her, I'm sort of would be betraying her, so they'll all turn away from me, and I don't want to disappoint my family. That's where I realize their greatest battle is. When Jesus Christ comes and He's saying, come, give me your hand, I will lead you my path, you'll walk my walk. Then we start looking around and we are realizing we'll be different from our family, we'll be different from our friends and our extended family, and we'll have to stand out. And God, how is that possible? Because we are betraying them. And the question is today, who are we betraying? Are we betraying our family or God Himself, Jesus Christ? And that choice we need to make.
Amen.
And that choice we are making every day. And that's why Jesus is giving us also all that strength when we need to prayerfully realize we do need to stand out. We need to be different. We need to be different because Christ was different. Because He is still different today. And when we become different, and when we are with Jesus Christ, and when we are walking in the light, and in the wisdom, and in God's love, then we are not afraid to be put to shame, because Christ Himself is walking right next with us. And walking with Christ brings the joy into our hearts.
Amen.
We know that walking with Jesus, we are learning how to be like Jesus, how to reflect Jesus in our life. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, one of my favorite verses, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, where Paul says, but we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord. So when is that happening? It is happening when we can see Jesus. It is happening when we are next to Jesus, when we are with Jesus Christ. He's walking with us, we are walking with Jesus. Then we feel His presence. We are in the presence of Jesus. So then what is happening? He says, are being transformed into the same image, into the image of Christ, from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. That's what is happening when we are walking a walk of faith with Jesus Christ. Then truly our fleshly nature, our human nature is being transformed, is being changed by the nature of Christ. And we start reflecting that glory of Jesus Christ. And that glory is shining on our faces. Like, remember, Moses came down from visiting with God. And what was the problem? They could not look at Moses. Remember why? Because his face was shining. Because he was in the presence of God. And that what was making him different. He was standing out from that massive crowd of people. And why was he different? Because the glory of God was reflected off his face. He had to cover his face, right? Remember? Mm-hmm. Because he was different. And his different position was because he was spending time with God. It is whenever we walk with Christ, and walking close with Christ, and talking to Christ, and adjusting to His pace, and forgetting our pace learning. We need to walk like Jesus. Amen. We should not be adapting Jesus to our walk. We should adapt our walk to the walk of Jesus Christ. And as we walk with Jesus, then we become different. Then our words become different. Our relationships become different. Then we treat our spouse different. You cannot be mean to your spouse walking with Jesus, right? You cannot hate your neighbor walking with Jesus. You cannot stop praying, walking with Jesus, because while you're walking with Jesus, you are praying, right? Because you are talking to Jesus. That's what prayer is all about. That's why walking with Jesus, the glory of Christ, is changing our nature, making us more and more like Him, and making us more like Him, it is making us different from this world. And don't be afraid to be different. You'll not faint. You may faint for a few moments, but Christ will pick you up, and He will carry you through until the glorious day when I know many will be looking at us, and they will feel horrible that they're not with Jesus. Remember Noah, like he was different. The book of Genesis, I had a Bible study in my church recently, and we looked again into that story of Noah, how he was not afraid to be different. He was preaching a message that seemed to be weird for everyone. And they were just making fun of him, but he was not ashamed, because God talked to him and God picked him and He made him different. And today, God is calling you to be that same Noah, or to be Moses, or to be Peter, or to be Paul, or to be Daniel. Those that were not afraid to stand out for Jesus. And I want to pray for you. Let's stand for a moment and say a prayer that God gives us, that walk that we all need. Our Heavenly Father, this morning we want to make a decision to walk with You. And Lord, whenever we are walking with You, then things start changing. And I need that change. I need my mind to be transformed. I need my conduct, my behavior, my actions to be transformed. And I need my priorities to be shifted also. And when I walk with You, Lord, I know You are making that change in my life. Lord, bless our decision this morning. If that's your decision, you may raise your hand before the Lord this morning, saying, God, I want to start walking with You today. In the name of Jesus, I pray for you. Amen. Amen. God bless you. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Will you come tomorrow morning? Yes. All right. See you tomorrow morning. Thank you.